Okay, so here we are. It is August 25th, 2023, and I'm sharing a little bit about what's happening in the real estate market here today. It certainly feels like fall. We've got this unusual weather, but we're gearing into the last half of the year. Let's just talk about what's happening in the real estate market and what that means for you if you're a buyer or a seller, and if you're buying a house, an investment, maybe a second home. What does that look like for you? And some of the things we're going to cover today are also while we have a shortage of homes on the market, what's going on with recession and inflation, all the other factors that are impacting the real estate markets. So these are just a few of the things that we're going to cover today. Of course, at any point, if you have a question, feel free to, jump into the chat and let me know what your questions are, because I'm always happy to answer those too. Okay. So I am your presenter. My name is Jackie White. If we haven't met before, I'm a local realtor here in the Denver metro area, and I'm happy to share this information with you. I always feel like knowledge is power, helps you make decisions. And so I'm excited to be here today. So just a little bit about me. I have two kids. They have me running all over the place with their sports commitments. Love cheering them on the sidelines. That would also include when we do moguls skiing for their competitions. I have to tell you, though, I'm an expert après skier. That's where I excel. I used to be in marketing before I got into real estate, working with a number of Fortune 500 companies, and along the way pivoted, joined real estate over a decade ago, and haven't looked back since. So I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. I started investing in 2012, got my license a couple years later. So I currently own investment properties and work with investors as well. I have a lot of personal experience with that. And of course, people buying and selling their primary residence. And I became a realtor in 2014, shortly after starting to invest, saw an opportunity for me to help some family and friends, and things took off ever since. So I've been fortunate enough to get involved in my local fire department as well. My husband is a firefighter, and I'm also on the board of directors for the Inner Canyon Fire Protection District, and an evangelist really when it comes to fire mitigation and protection. So that's a passion that I have. And, I've been in the foothills for over 15 years. I think we're going on 17 years now. I've been able to help quite a few families buy and sell real estate. So it's been a great experience.
Yes, I don't know if it was old or not.
So
still usable.
All right. So let's dive into market conditions and talk about what's happening here today in our real estate market. We're going to talk about the Denver metro area, and then a little bit touching on the national trends as well. So if you watch the news, of course, anytime there's something that's sensationalized, that gets a lot more attention. So keep in mind that when the newscasters are out there talking about real estate, sometimes they don't have all the facts, right? They just like to sensationalize things. And if we think back to when COVID started in March of 2020, boy, that real estate market really kicked itself into high gear, especially in 2021. And as we're going to review, some of the market conditions that we are experiencing today are quite similar to 2019, which was a certainly fine real estate year. It's just that we had those two unicorn years of really low interest rates and a lot of housing demand that is kind of tainted our expectations in terms of what we expect to happen moving forward. And just remember, regardless of what the market is doing, it presents opportunities for different people. It's just a matter of who you are and what that looks like for you. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So the brokerage I'm with is Your Castle Real Estate. We do a ton of research into what's happening in the real estate market. So I'm going to share some slides and kind of explain a few things with you. So if we look at the Denver metro area, the growth and appreciation of homes averages about 6% a year as we look back to the early 70s, so the past 50 years. And this solid line represents the average home price along the way, and the dotted line is condos. And as you can see, we did have our recession here in 2007, 2008, where home prices did fall. However, we really have had a lot of growth, especially since the beginning of the pandemic. And now things are starting to taper off a little bit in terms of the demand for housing. So keep that in mind as we move forward here, that things are not quite like they were at the beginning of the pandemic. And when we look at the average home price growth, while it's been 6% a year, just because we have a record year in terms of home prices doesn't mean that the following year we have to have it come down at some point. So just because it goes up doesn't mean it has to come down. Really, in the last 44 years, we only had 4 years of price declines. So we've had a lot of growth over the last couple decades. Now, one of the things I want to share is really what's happened since our last recession, which was 2007. Actually, believe it or not, we had a little recession when COVID started, but the one that's most memorable is due to that banking crisis in 2007 and 2008. And this chart illustrates the housing demand and the inventory. So the solid purple line were homes that were on the market. The dotted line are those that actually sold. And you can see a little bit of a wave, which represents seasonality. The gap between these two lines is the inventory, or the homes that were available to purchase. Now you can see we added in some shading to kind of demonstrate what the type of market is that we were experiencing. So a lot of people are remembering, since the last recession, a very efficient seller's market. But then as we got into the beginning of the pandemic, oh my gosh, it was dysfunctional. It was really, really tight when it came to sellers selling their homes, not a lot of inventory, and buyers bending over backwards and waiving a lot of their rights just to make sure that they could get into a home. So we are now exiting that type of dysfunctional atmosphere and getting to more of an efficient seller's market. We're going to talk about what that looks like here in just a moment. So one of the things that leads to defining what type of market we are in is inventory. And so that is the number of homes available to purchase. What I want to show you here really is the trends when it comes to homes that are available to purchase. So you can see January through December on the bottom here. And at the beginning of the year, we generally just kind of are easing into things, getting out of that holiday spirit and kind of getting geared up for taxes and getting back into business. And inventory really is heightened over the summertime, which is surprising, right? A lot of people would think there's not as much inventory over the summer, but this is where homes are sitting on the market a little bit longer, because we do see that people are vacationing and doing their things over the summertime, and then it starts to decline over the second half of the year because people have either sold their home or they're choosing not to sell because they don't want to move during the holidays. Now, one of the things I want to show you is that here we have our 2020 inventory, okay? So here's where we started. Really, things took a nosedive after we got out of quarantine because everybody was shopping for houses. And things were very, very tight. There weren't a lot of options. Then we've got 2021, which is the red line. And look, it's about half the number of homes that were available and really didn't have a lot of options. 22 was even less. Oh my gosh, at the beginning of the year, there was like nothing on the market. And then as interest rates went up, there was less buyer demand. And that started in about April or May of 2022. And between that time period and September, interest rates went from about 4% to close to 7%. So imagine you're starting your home search in April. You're pre-approved for the interest rate of 4%. You're still looking. Days are going by, weeks are going by, and those interest rates continue to go up. That can really impact how excited you are to buy a house, what your monthly payment's going to look like, and what your budget is going to be. And so a lot of people stepped out of the market. And so then there were more homes available to purchase. Now, 2023, we're kind of in between here. So we're in a decent place, but keep in mind, look at 2019. This was before the pandemic. So that was the numbers that we had. And really, one of the things we're experiencing right now, and I predicted this a couple years ago, is that during the beginning of COVID, we had interest rates super, super low. I mean, I had people closing at 2.5%, 3%. I mean, very, very low, practically free money to borrow. So now we've got all these people that have purchased homes and they've got what we call golden handcuffs. So they're in their home and it may not be the right school district. Maybe they've started a family, maybe health reasons are requiring them to maybe move, but now they're stuck because they have these really great interest rates on their home. But, moving is going to require them having to increase their mortgage payment. And that's just not something they want to do. And so because of that, we don't have as many homes available to purchase, which is why this kind of neon green line is where it is today, because there's just a lot of people staying put in their houses. And really, overall, in our country, we don't have enough houses to meet the demand. So baby boomers are living longer and they're able to be healthy and stay in their home without having to move out. So they're not downsizing or moving into assisted living as generations previously were. We also have a lot of millennials who have reached the median age of 30. And with that milestone birthday, they're thinking about starting a family, getting married, buying a house. And we just are not keeping pace with the demand of housing. So we are well below what we need to be in terms of building homes to meet that demand on a national scale. And, we have to look at the market conditions. While things have been quite fierce in terms of the real estate market in 2020 and 2021, we are out of that very tight seller's market and more into a regular efficient seller's market. And this is all defined by what we call months of inventory. So if you have the same number of buyers and the same number of sellers, how long does it take for all the houses that are on the market to sell? And that's how we calculate that number. So anything less than 4 months is considered a seller's market. More than 6 is a buyer's market, meaning that there's not a lot of buyers and a lot of homes available. And then we kind of have that balanced market at that 4 to 6 month time frame. So again, we are coming out of that very, very tight and extremely dysfunctional seller's market into a more efficient seller's market. Okay. One of the things I track very closely is some seasonality as far as when buyers are going out to look at homes and where the demand is. So this chart here shows us showings. So this is if a realtor and their buyers go out and look at a house, that would be considered a single showing on that home. And so we've got on the x-axis, January through December, and the y-axis is the number of showings on average for any home in the Denver metro area. So I want to point out 2020, this purple line where in April, we were all stuck at home watching Netflix and quarantine and eating and baking and doing nothing, right? Then when things opened up in May and every month after that, boy, did we really start humming along when it came to the real estate market. Interest rates are really low. People were getting in a situation where they had to work from home, or they were just kind of getting critical of their house after spending so much time in it that they were now choosing to move. And then in 2021, boy, we were at double the numbers we were seeing previously to showing traffic. Here is 2022 started out even higher, but when those interest rates started to go up in the spring, like I mentioned earlier, look at how the decline in showing traffic was the result. Now this bright pink number is this year. So you can see we are really on trend with 2017, 18, and 19, which were a little bit more typical years. So everybody's thinking about the flurry of showings and people getting 10 offers on their house in a matter of hours. That's gone. That was just kind of those unicorn years. And now we're into more of our efficient sellers market. So you have to price your home correctly because it's not like there's an abundance of buyers out there. It's a little bit more to a normal environment. So putting your house on the market and not preparing can put you in a bad way. Overall, though, we do still have not enough houses for buyers. And a lot of that really has to do with the population of our metro area. So all things being equal, looking at the inventory of active homes per 1,000 people in Denver, we have an average of 6.7, and right now we're at 2.2. So like I mentioned earlier, while the demand may have been suppressed because of interest rates going up, we still are in a situation where there's not enough housing to meet the overall population needs of our Denver metro area. And this is a national issue as well. So what does this mean for you? As long as the inventory of homes is low, buyers are going to have to raise a pretty strong offer. Now, I know it's not quite crazy like it was the beginning of the pandemic, but if there's a nice house in the neighborhood, the nicest, cleanest, most move-in ready home, that's what all the buyers want. And you're going to have to write a strong offer. You can't really expect to get a low ball accepted on that home. Now, sellers will generally have the edge on negotiations, but again, it all comes down with pricing the home correctly. And because of the higher cost of ownership of a home, renters are having to prolong their leases and renew them because they're just finding themselves in a position where they're not getting approved for loans, or maybe the costs are higher than their budget will allow. So if you are an investor, the rents you'll start to see go up, and the returns on your investment go up as well. So there's a unique opportunity if you are a homeowner in the foothills right now, and I work with quite a few of those. So this would be defined as the evergreen, conifer, Morrison, pine, Bailey, Indian Hills area. Okay. So if you own a home in this area, listen up. What we're finding is that homeowners are in a unique situation at this moment because mountain homes are still in demand. So when people are coming to Colorado, the environment in the foothills is what they envision. So being in the woods, having views, access to hiking and biking and outdoor trails, that is what buyers are seeking. That's what they have in their head when it comes to Colorado. And so those homes have a slighter edge among those down in Denver when it comes to demand. So what we're finding is down in town, or as we call it, down the hill, homes are staying on the market just a little bit longer because there's just more inventory of homes available, and they're a little bit more homogenous, if I'm being honest. So imagine you are looking for a house that's 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms with a 2-car garage. You could go to Centennial, Highlands Ranch, Parker, Broomfield, Thornton, and find probably the same layout in a variety of communities. But in the foothills, there really are not cookie cutter houses. The area is pretty much built out. There isn't a ton of acreage or the ability for a builder to come in and add 300 new homes. So the inventory is the inventory. If you want a house up here, there's only so many that are available. So if you are in a position where you're maybe thinking about downsizing, moving out of state, you currently own a home in the foothills, or maybe you're looking at moving down the hill, you're in a unique position right now where there's still interest in the foothills houses, but things are more balanced down the hill. And so you can put yourself in a great position to negotiate a good price on your replacement home, especially if you're downsizing. So keep that in mind. As a matter of fact, I just did this recently for a lovely couple who lived in Evergreen for 50 years and a ton of equity in their house. I mean, they built it 40 years ago, and it had just grown in value exponentially. And they were in a position of retirement where they just wanted to, because they were equity rich, use that money to pay cash for a new home and have some leftovers to enjoy pickleball and golf and the activities that they do in retirement that they're currently able to enjoy now. So that was a really smooth transition for them because they had the upper hand moving down the hill into town. So one of the things that's really impacting our economy and also the real estate market is mortgage interest rates. So as I mentioned a few times already, interest rates were very, very low at the beginning of the pandemic. We're talking about 2.5%, 3%, and people were able to borrow a lot more money than they might typically because their mortgage payment was much less. But let's keep in mind what the historical mortgage rates have been. I mean, look at what these are by the decades. We've never seen those kind of interest rates before. I mean, averages, 8, 9%. So we've had much higher interest rates historically in terms of what the environment allowed. Now, with interest rates much higher, I mean, today we're looking in the mid to upper 7s. As a matter of fact, I was just watching CNN while I was eating my lunch, and the chairman of the Fed was talking about these interest rates, and they might have to bump those up one more time at their next meeting, which I believe is in September, because the inflation is not at the numbers that they really would like to achieve sustainably, just to make sure that we don't spool back up if they start lowering rates. So we might see another interest rate hike, but right now we are in the mid to upper 7s, which is certainly significantly higher than what we've seen the last couple of years. But keep in mind, a lot of people are using the phrase date the rate, marry the house, and divorce the rent. So what that means is buy a house if it fits your family's needs now and get locked in on that purchase price, because the rate can be changed. You will purchase the home and that's the price you bought it for, but the rate you can refinance out of later. So presumably interest rates will come down at some point, and that's when you would refinance. And many lenders are offering programs where if you buy now, they will allow you to refinance down the road for free. And so that puts you in a position where today's interest rates are only temporary. But when it comes to the house, you're moving in. So this is your new home, right? And you want to divorce the rent. So stop paying a landlord money that you're never going to get anything back for, but go ahead and purchase a home that will allow you to build equity and wealth and have a roof over your head. Now, there are what we call 2-1 buy down options and lock and shop programs. And let's talk a little bit about what those look like. So with, again, marrying the house, dating the rate, let's walk through what this means. So marrying the house, buy the house you love, keep it for the long haul. Again, this isn't like the stock market. You never want to time anything. If you need a new home because of your health, your growing family, your job change, whatever that is, get in that house for what you see is the next few years or longer. Don't worry about the financing, because hopefully you'll be able to refinance and lower that rate. So don't let the rates affect your decision. Think about where you are in your life and what you need to do to have a safe environment for your family, because you can always look at refinancing in the future. Now, what is a 2-1 buy down? This is a loan program that we haven't seen for years, quite honestly, because the interest rates have been so low. But what it does is it allows the buyer to not just buy down the rate, but buy down a significant amount of the mortgage rate on that mortgage. So in the first year, the buyer would save 2% off of the current interest rate today. The second year, they would save 1%. And then in the third year, they get fixed into their mortgage rate. So for example, if interest rates are 7% today, for argument's sake, the first year would be 5%, so two points lower. The second year would be 6% or 1 point lower. And the third year, you'd be at 7%. So just for some cost perspective, on a $600,000 loan, you're talking about $15,000. And in many instances, you can negotiate that as part of the deal. So for a seller, it's far more advantageous to pay this $15,000 towards the closing costs for that buyer to get a great interest rate than to reduce the price of the home, say $25,000, $30,000, or $50,000. And so that's a negotiating tool. It can be used on both sides to help get a home under contract. Now, we talk a lot about these mortgage rates, and for those of you on the phone who maybe bought your first home in the 70s and 80s, you're thinking, well, what the heck? 7% is not so bad. I bought my house with interest rates in the teens, right? Keep in mind, what we have right now is a lot of millennials. And so again, with that median age of about 30, for their perspective of their entire adult life, all they know is interest rates that have been below 6%. And so when they start seeing things at 7.5%, 8%, it feels like it's really expensive, even though, like I mentioned earlier, in the late 70s and 80s, interest rates were well into the teens. All they remember is what they've seen in their adult life the last 12, 15 years, and interest rates have been below 6 and certainly very, very low most recently. So that is creating some psychological issues when it comes to buyers in terms of their confidence in moving forward with a purchase. So you just have to put everything in perspective. So if you're a little older and you bought your house a while ago, it feels like it's cheap, but for some buyers, it feels like it's expensive. So what are economists predicting for this year, right? We're halfway through the year, but I mean, what are they looking for, and have they been right so far? So as far as home sales, at the beginning of the year, they did predict that the volume would be down, and that has absolutely happened so far. So the last couple of years kind of felt like musical chairs. So interest rates are very low. Everyone was eager to move. And so everybody's moving around, getting their new house, and now they're in their seat. Okay. And there's no movement. So only a few people are selling their houses right now, and likely because they have to. And because the interest rates are higher, a lot of people are just kind of staying put. So that was a prediction that so far has come true this year. And the National Association of Realtors also predicted, their chief economist, that home sales would decline by 7%, but prices would be up 1%. So far, that's pretty accurate. So we haven't seen a decline in home prices as much as just the volume of sales has come down. Now, when we look at other influencers that can have an impact on the market, the broader US and global economy certainly does. Anytime you hear something in the news, if there's something happening in Ukraine or overseas, maybe there's global warming, maybe there's just things that making consumers feel a level of uncertainty, they usually put the brakes on, buying a house or buying a car or buying something else. They just kind of hold tight. Inflation certainly has had an impact on a lot of folks. I mean, I know I'm getting tired of paying $7 for a loaf of bread at the grocery store. So some things are starting to come down. I saw today gas is at an average of $3.83. So that has come down. So some of the things the Fed is doing, some of those levers they're pulling is starting to work. But we still do have those interest rates that are higher than we've seen over the last couple of years. Now, the labor market is still quite strong. So we are seeing that people are having jobs, but there are some talks of layoffs too. So things are kind of in flux. And of course, geopolitical issues, whether you're looking locally here in the US or abroad, I mean, there's just a lot of things happening that can have some people maybe take a pause of making a big purchase. When it comes to inflation and interest rates, one of the things the Fed is looking at is keeping the inflation at a level to keeping interest rates at a level to lower inflation as much as possible. And they want to keep it there for a period of time before they start to bring those interest rates down. What was tough is in 2022, again, starting around April, those interest rates went up so dramatically. It wasn't just these little tiny, adjustments. It was very, very rapid, going from about 4% to 7% in a matter of about 5 months, which made everybody's head spin. So we're hoping that moving forward, these adjustments are a little bit more precise and minute than these big, large scale increases that we saw in that time period. And so far, I'd say in the last year, it's been more like that, a little bit slight adjustments, but we are still, solidly in the sevens in terms of interest rates. Now we're hoping that those numbers start to stabilize and we start to see them coming down. And there's some good news in that mutual funds that invest in stocks that benefit from slowing inflation. That's been increasing. So we're hoping that we're on the right track here. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention is, when it comes to affordability, we're seeing a lot of migration too. So imagine you're living in one of these states like Colorado in the West, where you moved here a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden you have a ton of equity in your house. And, maybe you miss seeing your family and they're in another part of the country, and maybe it's a cheaper market. And so being able to work remotely gives you the flexibility to go ahead and cash out all that equity and go buy a nicer house in a cheaper part of the country, or maybe pay cash or do something different with your finances. And I'm seeing a lot of that quite regularly right now. Now, lower mortgage interest rates is going to lead to some decreased relocations. So like I mentioned earlier, those golden handcuffs are really kind of keeping people in their homes. But those that are bold and ready to go, they're moving because they've got a lot of equity in their house. Keep in mind, with less new homes for sale, we'll have a continued inventory issue because there's just been not as much new home starts by some of those, what we call production builders. So those are those like cookie cutter neighborhoods where they're building, dozens or hundreds of homes at a time. Now, some of the things we're seeing again across the country is that we might see some deceleration of that appreciation. So in states like Colorado, areas of the Sun Belt, the Carolinas, Texas, and Florida, those that were perceivably more desirable and where there was a lot of demand early on, those are starting to stabilize or maybe see some price declines. But the most stable markets were those that never really ramped up real quick during COVID. So parts of the Rust Belt, Ohio, Pennsylvania, upstate New York, where a lot of my family is from, Kansas, Ohio, some of those states, we're starting to see that they're staying pretty stable. As a matter of fact, I have some clients moving to Kansas right now, and it surprised me. They actually were experiencing multiple offer situations and things that we were seeing here in Colorado 2 years ago. It's now happening in this more stable market, which was honestly quite surprising to me. So a lot of people come and reach out to me and they say, where are all the foreclosures? Because I'm going to get a great deal. I'm going to buy this house that's in foreclosure. It's distressed. It's going to be a rental property, or I'm going to buy it and live in it. It's going to be awesome. But I want to just, share some information so that you don't get your hopes up. So there's a lot of households that are equity rich. They've got a ton of equity that they were able to achieve over the last 3 years. And really, even if the home prices were to come down 15%, we would still be well above our 2019 home values. So we're really not going to see this flood of foreclosures where people can take advantage of the scenario. Now, if you look back historically, the National Association of Realtors looked at how many realtors were looking or working with homeowners that were in distress. And in 2008, 49% of realtors were working with a property that was perhaps underwater or facing foreclosure. Whereas in about a year ago, last time the survey went out, it was 1%. So we just don't see this wave of delinquencies and foreclosures coming. Now, this is a chart that I just was familiar with about a week ago. I thought was great because it talks about homeowners and who has negative equity. In 2010, 28% of homeowners were underwater in their home. That means that the value of their home was less than the amount of their mortgage. And right now, we're at about 3.7%. So very, very low issues with equity, okay? And even if prices were to decline 15%, it would be very few folks compared to the last big recession that people remember, where there was a lot of foreclosures. So with all these people as well, As far as being behind on their payments, they probably have a fair amount of equity that they can go ahead and sell their home, move on with their life, and not have it go to auction. So the foreclosure boom that some people were anticipating might be happening, I just don't see that being the case when you look at the numbers. So who's driving the real estate market right now, right? I mean, we talk about recession, we talk about interest rates. So who actually is driving the real estate market? I read this article recently and I loved it because it was really truthfully what I was kind of predicting. And it is that baby boomers are the ones that are really driving the real estate market right now. So they have been in their homes for quite some time and they've got a lot of equity in their house. And so what they're able to do is as they look at downsizing, use that money to pay cash for a new home. And so I'm seeing that quite regularly. So they're equity rich, they're downsizing or taking some of that money and refinancing and buying something somewhere else, a second home perhaps. And when it comes to interest rates, again, they're just comparing when they bought their first home and the interest rate was 15, 16, 7%. 7% doesn't really bother them right now. And if they're so equity rich in their current home and they upgrade their house, it's probably a very small mortgage that they're getting anyways. So having an interest rate a little bit higher than we've seen the last couple of years really doesn't phase them so much. Now, Generation Z and millennials, so we're talking about mid-20s to early 30s, those kids, those buyers, shouldn't say kids, those home buyers are actually buying with cash. And you know what's happening? Mom and dad, who's the baby boomer or grandma, is helping with their purchase. So they are acting as the bank. And I've seen this happen quite often too. So there's a huge transfer of generational wealth happening right now where the baby boomers and the older generation is choosing to help the younger ones achieve home ownership. So they're either acting as a bank, so they're paying with cash and then setting up arrangements for repayment with the child, or they're saying, you know what, we have this money that at some point you're going to inherit. We know you could use it now. So we're going to gift this to you right now. And that's helping the kids get their foot in the door for home ownership. So this is happening quite frequently. I would say, honestly, probably about a third of the transactions where I deal with this generation, it's cash buyers with mom and dad's help. So they're serving as the bank and it's helping their kids to get in and own a home and not be paying rent anymore. So all the stuff we review, what does this all mean? Let's just kind of sum it all up. So if you're a homeowner and you're considering selling a house, keep in mind that you still have to prep your home for sale. So during 2021, the market was just nuts and it really didn't matter what the house looked like. You didn't have to paint, you didn't have to clean the carpets, you didn't even have to declutter. People were making offers on your house. And that just has gone away because people are being a little pickier now that they're paying a little bit more every month about what the house condition is. So they're going to want to see beautiful pictures, house looks like it's move-in ready. They don't want to see clutter. And those are the homes that are selling and getting the most interest. So those multiple offers, 6 figures above asking, waiving inspection and appraisal gap guarantees, it's pretty much gone. Now keep in mind, buyers exist all year long. So while we typically see an uptick in activity in the spring, there's people that are looking for houses right now. And sometimes when they're looking at what we consider the off time of year, that's okay because they're motivated, right? I'd much rather have one solid buyer come through my house than a flood of window shoppers. And so if someone is looking, I love it when they're looking, when it's snowing out, the weather sucks. I mean, that means the buyer is motivated. And so, like I said, I'd much rather have that one motivated buyer come through than a lot of looky-loos. So keep in mind, people are looking all year long. But what you want to do is really, once you decide that you're going to sell your house, try to disconnect emotionally to the process and really start to think of this as a business transaction. I know that can be hard if you lived in your house for decades, or regardless of the length of time, it's your home. It's where your memories are and where you raise your family and where you enjoy your free time. And so you now, though, have to get yourself in a mindset of going from living in the home to selling in the home. And that's going to take a little bit of adjustment when it comes to getting the house prepped and being in that mindset that you're ready to go. And this is now the path moving forward. So regardless, think about your family's needs and act accordingly. So don't try to time the market. If there's a need for your family to move, don't try to time the market. It doesn't work out well after all. Now, what does this mean if you are currently considering buying a home? Interest rates are higher than they've been the last couple of years, but we're closer to those 40-year norms. And don't forget, you can always look at refinancing the house down the road. As we talked about earlier, date that rate, marry the house. So find the house that's going to fit your needs for your family. And then you can always refinance that mortgage later on, or get that seller to buy down the interest rate for you so that you're not paying such high rates right now. Keep in mind, while you are looking at this, you won't be paying a premium above the asking price because it's less likely you're going to be competing with other buyers. So that's going to offer some savings right now. Your interest rate might be a little bit higher, but you're not also having to add on $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 above the asking price just to win that home. So there's a kind of a balance there, right? You have to kind of pick your poison, truthfully. It's either, are you going to buy now when you have the opportunity to lock in that purchase price and lower the interest rate later? Or are you going to wait for interest rates to come down like everybody else is? And then when they do, and everyone dives back into the real estate market, things are going to start churning and prices are going to go back up. So you get a lower interest rate, but you're also paying more for the house. So you got to figure out what works for your family's needs. And again, don't try to time the market. If it's time to move and you have something going on in your life and it's going to give you a more comfortable living arrangement, do it when it's time for your family. And lastly, if you are an investor, there's less competition right now. So sellers are a little bit more flexible. And it might not be a bad time to buy because you can just go ahead and ask the sellers to pay for, those interest rate reductions, lower your interest rate, increase your cash flow if it's a rental. And then just don't forget that the rents are going up as well, because for a lot of tenants, they're just, prolonging the time period in which they're actually going to go buy a house. So they're renewing their leases and they're staying a little bit longer because they just might not be in a position to qualify to actually go and buy a house. And don't forget, there's more than just cash flow, right? So if you own an investment property, you have long-term appreciation, tax write-offs, your renters are paying down that principal balance, plus you get the cash flow. So when it comes to those four factors, you can't have a winner in all four of them. If you're getting 3 out of 4, it's not too bad. Oh, this is a little slow here. It's rotating around. So, okay, key points to remember. Market conditions seen in late 2020 and 21, those are our unicorn years. That's an anomaly. I mean, the likelihood of that repeating itself is pretty low. And quite honestly, I hope it doesn't happen again, because that was driven by a global pandemic. And I don't know about you, but I don't need to go through that again. So hopefully that's not a scenario that we find ourselves in anytime soon. I'd much rather be in a more stable, efficient market than one that's all extreme and dysfunctional. And don't forget, people have to move all the time. There could be a divorce, could be a marriage, there could be babies, there could be someone that passes away, a job change. There's reasons why people have to move regardless of the market conditions. And so there's going to be houses available, and there's going to be buyers that are looking. So don't really track and try to time the market. Do what works best for your family's needs. And as we look here in Colorado, I am quite confident in terms of our ability, regardless of what the next couple months or years look like in terms of recession or economy, that we're going to rebound just fine. Because you know what? Colorado is a pretty nice place to live. And for all the reasons that we live here, I moved here in 2007 for the sun and the activities and this, outdoor options that were available and a strong job market. That's why people can still continue to live here. As a matter of fact, most recently in a survey, Colorado was ranked number 2, only behind Hawaii, as far as the best places and most desirable to live. So we still are in a great place where people want to live, and people are looking to own homes here as well. So anyways, that kind of covers where we are. Just want to give you that update kind of for the first half of this year. I am happy to hang out and answer any questions that you have. If you've got any, feel free to throw them in the chat box. I'm always happy to answer any questions that you have, or if there's something I didn't cover and you want me to touch on that too, I'm happy to do that as well. So feel free to jump in the chat. I will hang out here for just a minute and answer any questions that you might have. Okay, well, seeing that there's no questions, I don't have any on Facebook either, I will go ahead and conclude this webinar. Thank you again so much for joining. All my contact information is here. If you have any other follow-up questions, you want to reach out separately, always happy to help. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and I will see you around. Bye.